Hello everyone, welcome to Cashcroft TV. My name is Kalen Ashcroft. Thank you very much for watching and or listening to this episode of Ages of Empires. This happens to be episode 50. However, these do not need to be watched in any sort of order. So thank you very much, however, for tuning into this number 50 episode. So in this episode, we will be covering the Khwarazmian Empire and the Kingdom of France in the Middle Ages. So we have covered France, the French Kingdom, previously in history, but now we're in sort of an intermediary period, the Middle Ages. It's perhaps not the peak of France's power, but it is one of the peaks of France's power and an important period of our history of the Middle Ages. As well, from each of our two empires, we will be highlighting a specific leader. So from the Khwarazmian Empire, we will be highlighting Ala al-Din Muhammad II. And from the Kingdom of France in the Middle Ages, we will be highlighting Philip II, also known as Philip Augustus. And at the end, in the style of Plutarch's Parallel Lives, we will have a comparison between the two leaders to hopefully learn a little bit more about their respective empires and their respective individuals. So without further ado, we will begin with the first empire, the Khwarazmian Empire. So the Khwarazmian Empire, also known as the Khwarazmian Shah Empire, was a powerful state that emerged in Central Asia during the 11th century CE, Common Era, or AD, after death. Its rise and fall are intertwined with the complex, so we'll structure all of these empires on the rise and fall to see the reasons why they might succeed and why they might fail. And perhaps we can extrapolate into contemporary history as well. Therefore, this rise and fall is intertwined with the political dynamics in the region, including with the neighboring powers, internal struggles, and the impact of the Mongol conquest, a very large empire that we will soon be reaching. Therefore, we seek to find a history of its rise and fall. So, for some background information first, however, so the Khwarazmian Empire was a culturally Persianate, important to note, so based on some of our previous Persian empires as well, and Sunni Muslim as well, based on sort of connected to our previous Sunni Muslim empires as well, such as the Abbasid Caliphate that still exists during this time, and the Umayyad Caliphate. But we could also contrast that to Shia states such as the Fatimid Caliphate. Furthermore, it was an empire of Turkic Mamluk origin, so also Mamluks as well. The Khwarazmians ruled large parts of present-day Central Asia, Afghanistan, and Iran from 1077 to 1231 CE. First as vassals of the Seljuk Empire, an also important empire that we have covered, and I'll be grateful, and I am grateful if you have supported that episode, and the Kora Kitai Empire, and also another important empire we've also known as Western Kitai, or Western Liao. And from circa approximately 1190 CE as an independent rulers up until the Mongol conquest from 1219 to 1221. So they started as a vassal state, but then they sort of became independent, therefore earning themselves empire status and earning themselves a place on this series of greatest empires. And in fact, as we shall see, it's quite a large one too. So starting with the rise of the Khwarazmian Empire, so with its early origins. So the Khwarazmian Empire's roots can be traced back to the region of the Khwarazmiya, or Khwarazm, which is in present-day Uzbekistan. So Uzbekistan is sort of the original starting point of the Khwarazmian Empire, as well as Turkmenistan and parts of Kazakhstan and Iran, which had been parts of various empires throughout history. So these are much contested areas. So this also empire builds upon many of the previous histories that we have thus covered, including the Persian, Greek, and Arab empires. As for the Seljuk rule, another important empire we've previously covered. So in the 11th century, the Seljuk Turks, a powerful Turkic dynasty, conquered Kazan, which is and therefore engulfed the Khwarazmian people, and then therefore incorporating it into their own empire. So it was incorporated into the Seljuk Empire. However, the Seljuks faced internal strife, as we saw, leading to the fragmentation of their realm. So a very common theme of the decline of lots of empires is internal strife and fragmentations, which the Seljuk Empire was not immune to, although they had previously conquered the Khwarazmians. So therefore, the launch of the Khwarazmian Empire formally, so starting with expansion. So amid the Seljuk decline, the Khwarazmian dynasty led by An-Nushtegrin Garchai rose to prominence, and Anushtagin declared the Khwarazmian independence from the Seljuks, establishing the foundation of the Khwarazmian Empire. So Anushtagin was this sort of founding figure, and he declared independence from the Seljuk Empire and officially launched the Khwarazmian Empire. And as for its expansion, under Anushtaghin's successors, particularly Ala ad-Din Tukesh, who is the father of Ala ad-Din Muhammad, whom we will be covering in a specific biography, its territories expanded through conquest and diplomacy. They also annexed neighboring regions, including parts of Persia, which is a formidable force throughout history, Afghanistan, and Central Asia, becoming a major power in the region. As for the golden ages of the empire, as for prosperity and culture, so the Khwarazmian Empire experienced a period of economic prosperity and cultural flourishing during the 12th and early 13th century. Its capital, Urgench, which is in present-day Konya-Urgench in Turkmenistan, a place I'd be grateful to visit someday, became a center of trade and scholarship and art. And there's rich history in that region, even previous to the Khwarazmian Empire, that it continued to build upon as an independent empire. Furthermore, as for its tolerance and diversity, the empire was known for its relatively tolerant policies towards religious and ethnic minorities, fostering a diverse society within the Muslims, perhaps by being amalgamated by many different peoples. It was necessary to accept or for its cohesion to be tolerant. Furthermore, where Muslims, Christians, and Jews and others even coexisted. As for scientific and intellectual achievements, scholars and scientists flourished under the Khwarazmian patronage, and that's in the positive sense, to patronize or to invest in someone's art, for example, making significant contributions to the fields such as mathematics, astronomy, medicine, and philosophy. I make that in contrast to don't patronize me is often considered an insult today, but this is in a positive sense. As, however, with all empires we've covered so far, beginning with the decline and fall of the Khwarazmian Empire. So starting with the Mongol threat, a very formidable empire we will soon be covering. So the greatest challenge to the Khwarazmian Empire came from the east with the rise of the great Mongol Empire under Genghis Khan. In 1219, Genghis Khan sent envoys to the Khwarazmian Shah, Ala ad-Din Muhammad, requesting trade and diplomatic relations. So it started off seeming positive. However, the Khwarazmian governor, Inalchuk, executed the Mongol envoys, promoting Genghis Khan's wrath. So perhaps the Mongol invasion was inevitable, or perhaps it was because they killed these messengers. It certainly did not help. As for the Mongol invasion, in retaliation for the insult and seeking to expand the empire, Genghis Khan launched a devastating invasion of Khwarazm in 1219. The Mongols employed brutal tactics, including mass slaughter, destruction of cities, and widespread devastation. Despite fierce resistance, the Khwarazmian forces were unable to withstand the Mongol onslaught. So this gives them sort of a testament to the power of the Mongols. The Khwarazmian Empire was ruling over regions that had long been formidable fighting forces, but the Mongols came in with such force and brutal devastation. And it was much due to their cavalry advantage. As for the collapse, but that's not to say the Khwarazmian Empire was not able to use cavalry themselves, partially through their Mamluk origins, for example, but not as superior to the Mongols, evidently. As therefore to the collapse of the Khwarazmian Empire, so the Mongols systematically conquered the Khwarazmian territories, capturing cities and defeating the Khwarazmian army in decisive battles. Ala ad-Din Muhammad fled westward, but he eventually was assassinated by his own subjects, so perhaps it was internal struggle here as well. With his death, the Khwarazmian Empire ceased to exist as an independent entity, and its territories were absorbed into the rapidly expanding Mongol Empire, a very massive empire we will soon be covering. Thus, for the legacy of the Khwarazmian Empire. So while the Khwarazmian Empire's existence was relatively short-lived, its legacy endured through the memories of its cultural and achievements and its impact it had in the history of Central Asia as a generally quite tolerant state and amalgamation of multiple different peoples. In the Mongol conquest, however, it was marked as a turning point in the region's history, reshaping the political boundaries and cultural landscapes for centuries to come. And as we shall see, ruling over a very large extent of land. So as to highlight a specific leader from the Khwarazmian Empire, we have Ala al-Din Muhammad II, who we referenced. So one of the most significant rulers of the Khwarazmian Empire was Ala al-Din Muhammad II, also known as Ala al-Din, or the son of Tekish, another famous leader. And we will refer to him as Muhammad II in the shortest form. His reign marked a period, that is the son, the primary leader really highlighting. His reign marked a period of expansion, prosperity, and cultural advancement for the empire, but it also ended tragically with the devastating Mongol invasion. Therefore, we'll seek to find a biography and history of his life. So unfortunately, perhaps he wasn't maybe the pinnacle of the Khwarazmian power, but he's the one we have most information about because he was the one who ultimately was defeated by the Mongols, or in large part defeated by the Mongols. So for some background information, so Ala al-Din Muhammad was the second was Shah, the leader of the Khwarazmian, or absolute leader, absolute monarch of the Khwarazmian Empire, from 1200 to 1220. His ancestor was Anushtagun Charchai, who was the founder of, Garchai, who was the founder of the Khwarazmian Empire, a Turkic Gulam who eventually became a viceroy of a small province named Khwarazm, so a founder, and declared independence for the Khwarazmian Empire. He was subjected to the Mongol conquest of the Khwarazmian Empire, which resulted in the utter destruction of the empire. So the most information is known about him, and also it's probably the most sort of key figure to learn about in reference to the Khwarazmian Empire. But it would also be important to learn about his ancestor, Anushtagun, who founded the empire, and as well his father. So as for the early life and rise to power of Muhammad II, so Muhammad II was born in the 11th century, likely in the city of Khwarazm, into the ruling family of the Khwarazmian dynasty. So perhaps the best lineage one could have to rise to power within the Khwarazmian Empire, which isn't necessarily true for all the leaders we've highlighted. Some have come from more meager, and some have come from absolute meager beginnings. But that does not make one any more morally superior depending on their starting place. Little is known about his life, because that one cannot control their starting place. Little is known about his early life, however, but he likely received a thorough education in governance, warfare, and administration, as was customary for princes of the royal lineage. So certainly probably received the best education one could, or what they believed to be the best education, as he was expected to rule over the empire someday. So Muhammad II, Ala al-Din Muhammad II, ascended to the throne of the Khwarazmian after the death of his father, Ala ad-Din Tekish, sometime around the 12th century CE. His ascension to power marked a crucial turning point in the history of the empire, as he would go on to lead it to new heights of influence and prosperity, but ultimately to its collapse. As for his expansion and consolidation, Ala ad-Din Muhammad II inherited a realm that was already on the path of expansion thanks to the efforts of his predecessors. Under his reign, however, the empire experienced significant territorial growth and consolidation. He launched successful military campaigns against his neighboring states, expanding the Khwarazmian influence in Persia, Afghanistan, and Central Asia. So the point here is that he was a capable military leader. After the invasions of the Ghurid brothers, Ghiyath al-Din Ghori and Muiz al-Din invaded Ghuyath, died of illness. He invaded the Ghurid territories as well. One of the most notable achievements of the conquest was the conquest of the city of Bukhara, a major cultural and commercial center in Central Asia. The capture of Bukhara further solidified the Khwarazmian control over the region and enhanced the empire's wealth and prestige. As for his cultural and intellectual patronage, Ala al-Din Muhammad II was not only a skilled military leader, but also a patron of the arts, cultural, and scholarship. During his reign, the Khwarazmian Empire experienced flourishing intellectual and scientific endeavors. Scholars and thinkers from various backgrounds were welcomed at the Khwarazmian court, where they contributed to the fields such as mathematics, astronomy, medicine, and philosophy. So perhaps because he was ruling over a diverse base, he was also diverse in his patronage of intellectual pursuits. The capital city of Urgench under Ala al-Din Muhammad II's patronage became a vibrant city of learning and cultural exchange as well. It attracted scholars and artists from across the Islamic world, fostering a cosmopolitan atmosphere that enriched the empire's intellectual landscape. As, however, for his downfall and death. So despite his achievements, Ala al-Din Muhammad's reign would ultimately be overshadowed by the catastrophic Mongol invasion. In 1218, Genghis Khan, the ruler of the Mongol Empire, sent envoys to Ala al-Din Muhammad II, seeking peaceful relations and trade. There's a great series by Khan Ilguldan called Wolf of the Plains that really got me fascinated in history at a young age, and I think perhaps even inspired this series in large part. So thank you for that, and thank you to my friend Hayden O'Dwyer for getting me that series, getting me the box set of books. In retaliation to Genghis Khan, he launched a brutal invasion to Khwarazm in 1219 after the Khwarazmian Empire had killed their envoys. So perhaps it was the Khwarazmian Empire's fault in part for provoking the Mongol Empire by killing their envoys, who ostensibly were only looking for trade. So in 1219 they were invaded, leading to widespread devastation and the collapse of the Khwarazmian Empire ultimately to come, despite a mounting valiant defense. Ala al-Din Muhammad was unable to withstand the overwhelming force of the Mongol army. Some say it was in part because the Mongols were some of the first to become lactose tolerant and were perhaps able to have stronger bones and stronger muscles compared to their contemporaries. Therefore, he fled westward Muhammad II fled westward in desperate attempt to seek refuge, but was eventually assassinated by his own subjects, marking a tragic end of his reign and the Khwarazmian Empire. So, assassinated by his own subjects, perhaps out of necessity, or perhaps because they no longer supported him as a leader through his own doing. So thus, his legacy, Ala al-Din Muhammad II's reign, left a lasting legacy in the history of Central Asia. While his empire ultimately succumbed to the Mongol onslaught, his achievements in expanding the enriching Khwarazmian realm endure in the annals of history and in his relation with the battles as well with Genghis Khan. While his empire ultimately succumbed to the Mongol onslaught, his achievements in expanding and enriching the Khwarazmian realm endure in the annals of history. He is remembered as one of the most important rulers of the Khwarazmian dynasty, whose reign represented a brief and significant golden age of the empire. So the fascinating life of Ala al-Din Muhammad II and the Khwarazmian Empire. As for the content of the slide, so the title is Ala al-Din Muhammad II and the Khwarazmian Empire. It was a culturally Persianate Sunni Muslim, pardon me, I misspelled Muslim, it should be Muslim with an M, pardon me, empire of Turkic Mamluk origin, Sunni Muslim empire of Turkic Mamluk origin. It was ruled large parts of Central Asia, Afghanistan, and Iran as vassals of the Seljuk Empire and Khitai Empire, and as independent rulers from 1190 to the Mongol conquest in 1219. So forming as an official empire between those periods, but originating as a vassal state. The significant leader we highlighted was Ala al-Din Muhammad II. The empire was the Khwarazmian Empire. The period was circa 1077 to 1231 CE. This is considered the medieval period of history. The modern locations include, starting in Uzbekistan, Turkmenistan, Kazakhstan, Tajikistan, Iran, Afghanistan, Pakistan, Iraq, and Syria. The only one of these countries I've been close to is Syria, and I'd be grateful to visit all these eventually someday. Million square kilometers is 3.6, which is very large. In fact, our average empire size of only the empires that make the list of 80 or so empires that we will be covering, with the average is about 1.14, so this is over double the size of the empires. But it must also be noted that some parts of these were more or less sedentary, but still a very large region to rule over, and regions that had previously been ruled over by many other empires. The equivalent of in million square kilometers is 1.39%. Of the world is 2.67. Capitals was Garange from 1077 to 1212, and the capital was Samarkand from 1212 to 1220, Ghazna from 1220 to 1221, and Tabriz following that. The largest city after the Mongol invasion as they fled westward. The largest city was Shar-e-Ray. So important to note, perhaps, and maybe characteristic of some Muslim empires, is that the capital city is not necessarily their largest city. That's also true in Canada, for example. In most provinces, the largest city is not the capital city. The government was an absolute monarchy, for example, Ala al-Din Muhammad II. Common language, Lord Blackstone says there are two types of monarchies. There are the hereditary and there's the elective monarchy. This would be a hereditary monarchy. Common languages were Persian, which was the official and the court and the spoken language. Arabic was the language of theology and numistics. Kipchak Turkic was also a dynastic spoken language. For example, Ala al-Din Muhammad II, the dynastic family spoke a different Kipchak Turkic, so they were the royal family themselves were Turkish. And Oghuz Turkic was also a commonly spoken language. The religion was Sunni Islam. The population was in several millions, so quite large, but smaller than the population today due to technological changes. But perhaps the population was higher. Maybe we have forgotten, lost technology, but that seems unlikely. As for images, in the top left we have an image of Ala al-Din Muhammad II, a drawing. To the right of that we have the mausoleum of Khwarazm Shah, the second Arslan in present-day Turkmenistan. So one of the mausoleums of the Arslan II, or Khwarazm Shah. To the below that we have Garange, which is in present-day Konurgench. So, and you can see these beautiful mausoleums as well. And it was the first and most important capital of the Khwarazmian Empire, as we noted. To the right of that, we have the mausoleum of Sufi of Khwarazm, which is in Najm Din al-Kubra in Old Garange, which is in present-day Konya Urgench in Turkmenistan, a place I'd be grateful to visit someday. Above that, we have a Muni bowl depicting a battle scene in Kalkal, Iran in the early 13th century, so we can sort of get a depiction of what their soldiers might have looked like. And a beautiful battle scene with many colors as well on this bowl. It's fascinating that the colors have retained so well for so long. And to the right of that, we have the luster star-shaped tile showing the sultan surrounded by members of the court, so showing a sort of the sultan and surrounded by the court, but also showing the important significance of the star as well across cultures. And above that, we have a fascinating map where we can see the Khwarazmian Empire here, showing the massive region that it ruled over, expanding over many regions that had previously been ruled over by powerful empires. The Gurids, who they invaded upon, the Korokitai, an important empire we've covered, the Kipchaks, the Kumankhanates, the Kiev and Rus, an important empire we've covered, the Sultanate of Rum, the Ayyubid Sultanate, a very large sultanate we've covered as well by Saladin, for example, the Abbasid Caliphate, a massive caliphate, one of the tied for the seventh largest empire of all time, to the west of the Khwarazmian Empire, the Zengids here, the Yadvaz, the Khotro here, the Shishia, the Mongol Confederation would later expand to be the Mongol Empire and encompass the Khwarazmian Empire, the Song Dynasty, important empire we've covered. We've also covered Shishia, the Tsin Dynasty, and the Goryeo, the famous Korean Empire, Pagan, and Khmer. So very fascinating map. So important Khwarazmian Shahs, we have Anushtagin Garchai, the founder of, or the one who declared independence for the Khwarazmian Empire, who reigned from 1077 to 1096 or 1097. And we have Jalal al-Din Mingburnu, who reigned from 1220 to 1231. Some important dates: it was established in circa 1077. The Mongol conquest of the Khwarazmian Empire was in 1219 to 1221. The Battle of Yisisemin was in 1230, and it was disestablished in 1231 after the Mongol invasion. So that is the Khwarazmian Empire and Ala al-Din Muhammad II, and we will cover the leader and the empire more respectively in the comparison with Philip Augustus. So as for the Kingdom of France in the Middle Ages, I think this is a very fascinating period of history, as perhaps I noted that maybe not. We've covered the previous Kingdom of France, and we will cover also the future French empires, but this is a sort of maybe an intermediary period, but also in its own right a peak, but maybe not the highest peak of French achievement. And we also cover the Napoleonic Empire as well. So the history of the Kingdom of France in the Middle Ages is a complex narrative of political, social, and cultural developments shaped by the interactions of monarchs, nobles, clergy, and commoners. Therefore, we will seek to find a history of the rise and fall of this period as well. So for some important details, first, so the Kingdom of France in the Middle Ages, which roughly from the 10th century to the middle of the 15th century, was marked by the fragmentation of the Carolingian Empire, which we previously covered, and West Francia. In the periods of 843 to 987 was that. And also followed by the expansion of the royal control by the House of Capet. So that's sort of the starting period of this period we're covering Kingdom of France in the Middle Ages, starting with the expansion of the House of the Capet from 987 to 1328, including their struggles with the virtually independent principalities or duchies, counties, such as the Norman and Angevin regions. So there are many different semi-autonomous regions and with varying autonomy within the region over this period. And the creation and the extension of the administrative state and control under those such as Philip II or Philip Augustus and Louis IX, important leaders we will highlight, but specifically Philip II we will have a specific biography of in the 13th century. And the rise of the House Valois we will also cover from 1328 to 1589, including the protected dynastic crises of the House of the Plantagenet and the Angevin Empire, culminating in the 100 Years' War, which unfortunately this region would ultimately lose in this period, from 1337 to 1453. So we will come up to the 100 Years' War in this episode. And therefore this was compounded by the catastrophic Black Death in 1348. So this also comes into this period. The Black Death, the famous one, is likely heard of, which laid the seeds to this Kingdom of France in the Middle Ages, laid the seeds for a more centralized and expanded state in the early modern period, which we'll highlight, and the creation of a sense of French identity. So the formulation of French identity could in large part be attributed to this period of time, for example, the famous Fleur de Lis. So, starting with the rise of the Kingdom of France in the Middle of Ages. So the Merovingian and Carolingian dynasties, which we previously covered, so some background information in the 5th and 10th centuries, 5th to the 10th centuries. So the early medieval period of France saw the emergence of the Merovingian dynasties, followed by the Carolingian dynasties, both of which we have covered previously. Clovis I, a previous leader we've highlighted specifically, a Merovingian king, united the Frankish tribes and established the Kingdom of the Franks in the 5th century. So sort of like a Genghis Khan-like figure uniting the tribes in the 5th century. That's Clovis II. His conversion to Christianity, also a key moment in history, laid the foundation for the kingdoms tied to the Catholic Church. As for Charlemagne, was also an important figure during this period, and his Carolingian Empire in the 8th and the 9th centuries. So Charlemagne was the most famous Carolingian ruler, and he expanded the Frankish kingdom into a vast empire that encompassed much of Western Europe. His coronation as Emperor of the Romans by Pope Leo III in 800 CE signaled the revival of the imperial authority in the West as well. However, the empire fragmented after his death, leading amongst his 3 children, leading to the emergence of separate Carolingian kingdoms, including West Francia, which laid the groundwork for the Kingdom of France in the Middle Ages, which we'll be covering now. So after this division, perhaps West Francia was maybe the leading one, but then there was another period of consolidation, which we'll be highlighting here, the Kingdom of France in the Middle Ages. Starting with the Capetian dynasty, or Capetian dynasty in the 10th to the 14th centuries CE. So the rise of the Capetian or the Capetian dynasty marked the consolidation of royal authority in France. Hugh Capet, who was the Count of Paris, which was ultimately become the capital and the largest city of France. So maybe one way France differs from, or like the Khwarazmian Empire, for example, is the capital and the largest city have often throughout history been the same, which is an indication of centralization, and perhaps one of the reasons why they resulted in the ultimate revolution, as biographed or historicized by Alexis de Tocqueville, one of my favorite authors, who wrote on the old regime and the French Revolution. But nonetheless, the capital, Hugh Capet was the Count of Paris, so coming from the capital, or the largest city, and he was elected King of the Franks in 987 CE, starting the Capetian dynasty, and founding the Capetian dynasty. Furthermore, the Capetians gradually extended their control over neighboring territories as well, consolidating their power within the Ile-de-France region, which is the capital region now in France, which is, they call it Ile-de-France, but it's not actually an island, but nonetheless it's sort of a large part of the centralization of France. And this was done so at this time by Hugh Capet. As for centralization and expansion, over the subsequent centuries, successive Capetian monarchs worked to centralize authorities following in Hugh Capet's history. Side note, my grandfather's name was Hugh, and he was born in Montreal, so perhaps named after Hugh Capet. I never made that connection until now. As for, furthermore, for the expansion under subsequent kings, they followed in Hugh Capet's spirit as well, by also focusing on centralization, which has been a common theme also in France history throughout all time. Successive work to centralize authority and weaken the power of the unruly nobles and expand their kingdom's borders. So perhaps later, ultimately, with the French Revolution, one of the problems Alexis de Tocqueville notes is that the king removed the nobles, and then it was only just the commoners and him, and he was left defenseless. So that was something that was not done in the UK. The nobles were retained, which sort of served as a buffer state, perhaps, for the king. Perhaps all three estates are necessary, and perhaps also as well the church. As for Louis the Sixth, who reigned from 1108 to 1137, and Philip II, Philip Augustus, who we will highlight in a specific biography, who reigned from 1180 to 1223, were particularly instrumental in their efforts, laying their groundwork for the rise of a strong centralized monarchy in France, and further to come in this region. As for the golden age of the Kingdom of France in the Middle Ages, the Philip II Augustus and the Angevin Empire. So in the 12th and 13th centuries, Philip II, or Philip Augustus, one of France's most influential monarchs, played a pivotal role in shaping the kingdom's destiny. He successfully challenged the Angevin Empire of England, and led by King John Lackland in the struggle for control over the territories of France. So they had been invading France, and France had also been invading England as well. The decisive French victory at the Battle of Bouvines in 1214 solidified Philip II's authority and secured territorial integrity in the kingdom, giving him the title Augustus. As for cultural and intellectual achievements and flourishing during this time, the High Middle Ages witnessed a period of cultural and intellectual flourishing in France. The rise of universities, such as the University of Paris, originated during this time. So Paris 1, or Paris 2, Paris 1, or Paris 2, for example, and the patronage of arts and literature by the monarchy and the nobility contributed to the development of French language and culture. So important period in educational history as well. As for challenges, however, and decline of this period, starting with the 100 Years' War in the 14th to the 15th century, evidently expanding over 100 years. The 100 Years' War, a protracted conflict between France and England, brought significant challenges to the Kingdom of France. The war, which lasted from 1137 to 1453, so even more than 100 years, saw territorial losses, internal strife, and devastation across the realm. The Battle of Agincourt in 1415 and the capture of Paris by the English in 1420 were particularly humiliating setbacks to the French. And so the Paris itself was captured during this time, so a humiliating period in French history. As for dynastic crises, in the 14th century also witnessed internal turmoil within the Capetian dynasty, including the Valois Hainaut and Burgundian factions, who would ultimately form their own dynasties, which vied for control over the throne, and the Valois particularly. The assassination of Louis I, Duke of Orleans, which is Orleans is the castle region in France today, in 1000, which in just south of the Ile-de-France, in 1407, intensified tensions and contributed to the outbreak of civil war within the region. As for recovery, however, and consolidation, despite these challenges, the Kingdom of France eventually recovered under the leadership of Charles VII and Joan of Arc, the famous figure in history, who played a crucial role in the turning of the tide of the 100 Years' War. The French victory at the Battle of Castillon in 1453 marked the end of the English territorial ambitions in France and beginning a period of recovery and consolidation with the kingdom. So despite Paris being captured by the English, ultimately figures such as Joan of Arc and ultimately repelled the English, and ultimately it garnered the territorial sovereignty that France experiences and enjoys today, if not considered entirely part of the European Union. But still, it does have that territorial sovereignty. As for legacy, so the Kingdom of France's experience in the Middle Ages laid the foundation for the modern nation state. The centralization of the power of the Capetian monarchs emerged a distinct French identity and a centralization amongst Paris. And the struggles against the external and internal foes all contributed to this shaping of France's historical trajectory, making it, for example, distinct from England. Despite periods of decline and conflict, the Kingdom of France endured and evolved, leaving an indelible mark on European history and the French region more broadly throughout all time, and even perhaps and certainly till today. So to highlight a specific leader from this time, we highlight Philip II, King Philip II, or Philip Augustus. So one of the most important rulers of the Kingdom of France during the Middle Ages was King Philip II, also known as Philip Augustus. His reign, which lasted from 1180 to 1223, marked a crucial period of consolidation, expansion, and institutional development for the French monarchy. Therefore, we seek to find a history or biography of his life. So Philip II, born as one might guess in August, on August 21st, I believe that makes him a Leo, in which I am as well, in 1165, and dying in the 14th of July in 1223. His by name was Philip Augustus, or in French, Philippe Auguste, I believe, was King of France from 1180 to 1223. His predecessors have been known as Kings of the Franks, or in Latin, Rex Francorum. But from 1190 onwards, Philip became known as the first French monarch to style himself King of France, so changing the name from King of the Franks to King of France, or Rex Franci. The son of King Louis VII and his third wife Adela of Champagne, he was originally nicknamed Dieudonné, which is God-given, because he was the first son and born late of his father's life, so sort of a miracle child, a father who is unlikely to have a son, for example. Well, certainly in this case, ultimately did have the son, so he was considered Dieudonné, God-given. Philip was given the epithet Augustus by the chronicler Rigord, so given the name Augustus after, for having extended the crown lands of France so remarkably. So a significant title. Many throughout even the Roman Empire have styled themselves Augustus after Augustus himself, and Philip claims, or has been styled with it, Philip II has been styled with his great title, or at least title of a significant conqueror or leader. So for his early life and ascension to the throne, so Philip II was born on the 21st of August in 1165 in Jeunesse, France, the son of King Louis VII and Queen Adele of Champagne. He inherited the throne of France at the age of 15, so rather young age, but life expectancy was short at that time, but still a young age. For example, Blackstone's Commentaries of England notes that a young age for a monarch would be less than 18 was considered, at least during that time, but this perhaps predates that, but still 15 would likely be considered a young age at this time. following the death of his father in 1180. As a young king, Philip faced significant challenges, including internal rebellions by vassals and external threats from rival powers, so not as consolidated as perhaps it was during periods under the kingdom of the Franks, as we previously covered, but relatively consolidated for the Middle Ages. As for his consolidation and royal authority, despite his youth, Philip II proved a shrewd and capable ruler, determined to assert royal authority over the unruly feudal nobility, so it was a very feudal state. He embarked on a series of campaigns to suppress rebellions and consolidate his controls over the realm. Lord Blackstone talks of the Baron Wars, where a monarch in England would suppress the barons, and here we have a similar case with Philip II, where he had to suppress barons and suppress feudal lords. And he embarked on a series of campaigns to suppress these rebellions and consolidate control over the realm. One of his most notable achievements was the defeat of the coalition of rebellious vassals, including the powerful Angevin Empire of England, at the Battle of Bouvines in 1214. This decisive victory solidified Philip II's authority and established the Kingdom of France's dominant power as a dominant power in Western Europe. So the defeat or winning decisive battles against the Angevin Empire solidified his territory and authority in the region. As for his expansion of territories, Philip II was also instrumental in the expanding of the territorial holdings of the Kingdom of France through a combination of diplomacy, marriage alliances, and military conquest. So not just a military conqueror, but also knew how to marry effectively, but also knew how to be an effective diplomat. Through these endeavors, he added significant territories to his royal domain, including Normandy, the famous place of William the Conqueror, for example, Anjou, Maine, and Touraine. His strategies of marriages, including the union with Isabel of Hainaut and later Agnes of Maranea, helped strengthen France's position and secure alliances with neighboring powers. As for institutional reforms, Philip II implemented several institutional reforms aimed at strengthening the royal administration and centralizing power. He established royal baillis, or bailiffs, and seneschals, or stewards, to oversee administration of justice and collect taxes in the provinces. So by centralizing authority, by creating a larger bureaucracy, more public servants, for example, these bailiffs and stewards who would implement his sort of will, but for example, it would be equivalent to expanding the government, a very centralized motion. And also a way of collecting tax, but that by collecting tax, that also necessitates or implies that there was private enterprise significantly during this time, something to be taxed. Philip also supported the construction of several iconic landmarks, including the Louvre fortress in Paris and the city walls of numerous French towers. So the construction of the Louvre is in large part due to Philip II's endeavors. As for his legacy, Philip II's reign left a lasting, and also that contributed to the centralization of Paris as both the capital and the largest city at the time. As for his legacy, Philip II's reign left a lasting legacy in the history of France. His efforts to centralize power and expand the royal domain laid the foundation for the emergence of a strong centralized monarchy in France. He is remembered as one of the most successful and influential monarchs of the Capetian dynasty, whose reign marked a turning point in the history of the Kingdom of France. A very, very fascinating and important leader, and expanding Paris, expanding the territory of the Kingdom of France in the Middle Ages, and therefore perhaps worthy of the title of Augustus. So as for the content of the slides, title we have Philip II and the Kingdom of France in the Middle Ages. It came from the fragmentation of the Carolingian empires and West Francia to the expansion of the royal control by the House Capet and the House of Valois. It culminated in the dynastic crisis against the House of the Plantagenets and their Angevin Empire, and the 100 Years' War and the Black Death also followed. The significant leader was Philip Augustus. The empire was the Kingdom of France in the Middle Ages. The period was 987 to circa the 15th century CE, which is considered the Middle Ages. The modern locations include France, Belgium, Switzerland, Italy, and Spain. million square kilometers is 0.4, so rather on the smaller side of empires we will be covering throughout history, but nonetheless it's an important period, or or at least it's a significantly powerful region today, and therefore perhaps history is important to track. But also there's many different states going on. Despite it being a small region, it was very sedentary and supported a very large population, so it was very dense. Million square kilometers was 0.15. The equivalent percent of the world, excluding Antarctica, was 0.30. The capital was Paris, also the largest city. The government was a feudal monarchy, to its detriment and benefit at times, in ways to promote private enterprise, but also to vie for power with the king. Common languages were Latin, French was the official language, Occitan, the Franco-Provençal, which is provincial French, Breton and Basque, Bretonic language, fascinating, beautiful language as well. Religion is Roman Catholicism. Population was likely 10 to 20 million, so certainly smaller than the population of this region today due to technological changes, but getting larger, certainly, especially considering the smaller region of the world. We have empires that have covered much larger regions of the world that have estimated to have smaller populations. For example, many of our nomadic empires would rule over perhaps even 10 times as, or at least 4 times as large regions of the globe, but nonetheless have allegedly smaller populations because they were largely nomadic and did not have, for example, agriculture to support huge populations. As for images, it looks like it might be redundant having so many fleur-de-lis, but they are actually different, as the left is the, to start with the image, actually, pardon me, of Philip II. That's Philip II enthroned in a portrait by Jean de Tillet, which was produced in 1555 to 1566, so a post-mortem produced painting, but nonetheless get an image as to the regalness and sort of some of the significant features of the monarch of Philip II. To the right of that, we have the royal banner of the Capetian dynasty, which has the many fleur-de-lis, and to the right of that, we have the royal banner of the Valois dynasty, which includes just 3 fleur-de-lis, so there is a distinction there. To the right of that, we have the coat of arms of the Kingdom of France from 1376. So now we really see these French symbols starting to solidify during this period. To the right of that, we have the 2 variants of the oriflamme, or the battle standard of the King of France. As you can see, that features a sun, and it says S. Denis for Saint Denis. To the right of that, we have a view of the remains of a Christian, the Abbey of Cluny, which is a Benedictine monastery, showing the importance of Christianity during the period, which was the center of the monastic life in the revival of the Middle Ages, and marked an important step in the cultural rebirth following the early Middle Ages. But also get an important visage to the significant architectural capacities during the time, seeing the beauty of many of these churches that arose throughout the region, but also the fact that there were for developments not just in Paris, and there was architectural achievements not just in Paris, shows that the sort of power of many of the feudal lords, but also the secular state and also the religious states. As to the right of that, we have St. Louis saw France's cultural expansion in the Western Christian world, and France became a truly centralized kingdom under Louis IX. So this we have here is St. Louis in the top right, an important figure. And France became a truly centralized kingdom under Louis IX, who reigned from 1226 to 1270. St. Louis has often been portrayed as a one-dimensional character, a flawless example of faith, and an administrative reformer who cared for the governed and governed everyone. However, his reign was far from perfect for everyone, allegedly, for he made unsuccessful crusades, so although being a certainly perhaps ostensibly pious person, he would send people perhaps to unnecessary death, perhaps, allegedly. He made unsuccessful crusades, and his expanding administration raised opposition, and he burned Jewish books at the Pope's urging too, so perhaps not a very tolerant individual as well. Below that, we have an image of Philip II, Philip Augustus, victorious at Bouvines, the famous battle, thus annexing Normandy and Anjou into his royal domains, which remain part of France to today, but have not. After the Middle Ages, it would be contested again, but nonetheless, if he did not win this battle, maybe today it would not be a part of France. That is Normandy. And Normandy would later, for example, William the Conqueror came from Normandy, would come to conquer England, so a very disputed land, but nonetheless, Philip II won in the Battle of Bouvines, and Anjou as well. This battle involved a complex set of alliances from three important states. The kingdoms of France and England and the Holy Roman Empire was also involved in this important battle. As for additional information as well, we have the legislature formed during this time was called the Estates General, which was since 1302 CE. The beginning of the Capetian dynasty was in 987 CE. The 100 Years' War, where the Capetians were ultimately disposed, which is disputed, however, was from 1337 to 1453, or 1422, where the Capetians were allegedly disposed during that 100 Years' War period. As for the old regime, the ancien regime was in the 15th century. The currency was the livre, francs, and the écu. So the ancien regime, so in the old regime of the French Revolution, that is the period that Alexis de Tocqueville covers, and that is the period we will cover next. It was preceded by West Francia, one of the successor states of the Carolingian dynasty, after the succession disputes amongst his successors, that is Charlemagne, and it was succeeded by the Kingdom of France, as we will cover its further history. And in the top right, we have the map of the dark green would be the Kingdom of France in the Middle Ages. So not its largest territorial extent, but certainly one of its peaks, and certainly an important period, and perhaps a significant development of French culture throughout time. So that is Philip II and the Kingdom of France. And as for a comparison between Ala al-Din Muhammad II and Philip II, so many similarities and differences. One ostensibly is they're both the second to their name, but we'll highlight some more substantial differences between them to come. So Ala al-Din Muhammad II of the Khwarazmian Empire and King Philip II of the Kingdom of France in the Middle Ages were both influential rulers during the Middle Ages or medieval periods, but they governed in vastly different contexts and faced distinct challenges. Therefore, we seek to compare and contrast these two. So as for their cultural background, Ala al-Din Muhammad II ruled over the Khwarazmian Empire, a powerful state in Central Asia during the 12th century and early 13th century. His empire was situated on the Silk Road, a major trade route connecting the east and west, which contributed to its prosperity and cultural exchange, but also necessitating maybe a nomadic sort of lifestyle in part. And as well, Ala-Din Muhammad II inherited his realm from Tekish, and he was already on the path of expansion through conquest and diplomacy, but nonetheless won the state through absolute monarchy, through his father, and he came from the most powerful lineage, and it was sort of expected perhaps that he would rule over the Khwarazmian Empire. As for Philip II, he ruled over the Kingdom of France, a feudal monarchy, so perhaps a slightly less centralized government in Western Europe during the 12th century and early 13th century, because there were powerful feudal lords as well, although Philip II still was the absolute monarch. France was part of a complex web of feudal relations, with the monarchy contending with powerful vassals such as the Angevin Empire in England. So perhaps not, like Muhammad II, certainly came from the most powerful lineage, but nonetheless there were maybe relatively more powerful vassals under him than under Muhammad II. But then again, Muhammad II ruled over very distinct groups as well, so there were many powerful people as well that he ruled over. So they both have their perhaps powerful vassals, but I would make the argument that the feudal monarchy was relatively more decentralized than Muhammad II's governance, at least during their times. But they both came from the most powerful lineage, and they were both expected to become king. Philip II coming from the Capetian house, so and Muhammad II coming from the founder of his dynasty. So nonetheless, unlike some of perhaps of our other leaders, some of our have been entirely self-made, but most of our leaders have came from the primary lineage. As for their achievements and policies, Ala al-Din Muhammad II is known for his military conquests, which expanded the Khwarazmian Empire for a time, but ultimately he was defeated by the Mongol Empire by Genghis Khan. But he himself expanded into Persia, Afghanistan, and Central Asia. He promoted cultural and intellectual patronage, fostering a period of prosperity and cultural flourishing in the empire. Muhammad II faced challenges in maintaining the cohesion, however, of his diverse empire, balancing the interests of the various ethnic and religious groups. So perhaps the diversity of religious groups and ethnicities might have been equivalent or more difficult than managing multiple feudal lords. As for King Philip II, is renowned for his efforts to centralize power and strengthen the feudal monarchy. He waged successful military campaigns against rebellious vassals and rival powers, including the Angevin Empire of England, culminating in the decisive victory at the Battle of Louvain. So both of them were successful in battle. Philip implemented institutional reforms to improve the royal administration, including the establishment of royal bailiffs and schnenschals, or stewards, to promote economic and cultural development in France. So perhaps a more very tangible creation of centralized power in the case of Philip II. Both of them were successful in terms of military endeavors, but Muhammad II was ultimately defeated by the Mongol Empire and had to flee westward, and was even assassinated by his own people. As for their legacy, Muhammad II, son of Tekish, whose reign marked a period of territorial expansion and cultural flourishing during the Khwarazmian Empire. Despite his achievements, his legacy is overshadowed, however, by the devastating Mongol invasion, which led to the downfall of his empire. King Philip II left a lasting legacy in the history of France. He laid the foundation of the emergence of a strong centralized monarchy in France and expanded the royal domain, setting the stage for the consolidation of the French state. Philip's institutional reforms and military successes contributed to the growth of the French power and influence of the Western Europe. Thus, while al-Din Muhammad II of the Kingdom of the Khwarazmian Empire and King Philip II of the Kingdom of France in the Middle Ages were both significant rulers during the Middle Ages or medieval period, they governed in distinct geopolitical contexts and pursued different strategies to achieve their goals of centralization and expansion. Despite these differences, both rulers left indelible marks in the history of their respective regions. I guess to maybe summarize it is that Muhammad II ultimately resulted in the tragic fate of the Khwarazmian Empire with the Mongol invasion, which was not necessarily the case for Philip II Augustus. So two perhaps similar leaders coming from both the primary leadership, both absolute monarchs ruling over diverse peoples, but one was ultimately conquered by another. But allegedly the Kingdom of France would go into the 100 Years' War, which would ultimately lead to many failures as well. So we could have highlighted a different leader who might have been more tragic. So maybe here we can juxtapose a august leader and a tragic leader, but both perhaps given relatively similar cards, but different times. Perhaps maybe the killing of the envoys of the Mongols ultimately led to the decline and fall of the Khwarazmian Empire, and maybe it was ultimately their fault, or maybe the Mongol invasion was inevitable and it was there was nothing Muhammad II could have done. Perhaps Philip II would have succeeded in Muhammad II's case, or perhaps Muhammad II would have succeeded in Philip II's case. It's impossible to tell, but we can only compare and hopefully learn more about them and their respective empires. So thank you very much. My name is Kalen Ashcroft. This is Cashcroft TV. Thank you very much for watching this episode or listening to this episode 50 of Ages of Empires, where we've covered the Khwarazmian Empire and the Kingdom of France in the Middle Ages, as well Ala al-Din, Muhammad II, and Philip II of these respective empires. Thank you very much for your support, and I'd be very grateful if you continue to provide it. Thank you so much.